Hello, everyone. I'm Nik Hengel from Novus Media, and I thank you for taking time today to learn about how we use location data to help build our future-ready multimedia plans. So a little bit about Novus. At Novus, we're a hyper-local multimedia planning agency, and what that means is we develop innovative strategic plans customized down to hyper-local geographies. This includes everything from target audience analysis, flighting, communications goal, media mix, and innovative tactics, but again, all at that hyper-local geography. Additionally, we have built a digital planning and buying expertise that uses those same specialized geo-targeted tactics to drive results for our clients. And myself, I lead our analytics services team called Localytics. And what we do is we take data and transform it into insights that help all of our media planning and strategy teams develop these comprehensive location-first media plans that ultimately drive better results for our clients. So what is it exactly that we do here at Novus? What is our strategic approach? Well, quite simply, we think it's that geography is destiny. And what we mean by that is where people work, where they live, and where they play tells us a lot. It gives us a good handle of who they are, what they're interested in, what makes them tick, in a way that we can use those different signals to build those customized hyper-local media plans down to individual zip code by zip code level plans for our clients. We believe this is ever more imperative to figure out how we can live in a world that we know is changing. We know that cookies are going away, and that's going to continue to make marketers think differently about how we can use data and intelligence to target our consumers. We like to think that we're going to have to be pretty agile as we continue to navigate these changes in the regulatory space. And so eMarketer showing a couple of stats here from last year, actually, where if you look at the impact of that third-party cookie deprecation, we're seeing that most people have it top of mind, and it's going to impact everything from reporting to optimization to buying, and what we were just talking about, to planning. How do you understand who to target and how to target consumers if you can't necessarily understand what makes them as an individual tick? That's where our future-ready planning approach comes in. Traditionally, as I just was talking about, you're using data to activate against an individual and try to find that one individual and try to target them in a really effective manner. At Novus, we think a little bit differently. And what we're doing is we're using data to help define the upfront strategy and saturate high-value geography. So it isn't just about finding that one consumer, but it's about finding where do you have a high density of consumers, so you can use a variety of multimedia tactics to reach them in a very efficient manner. I'm now going to take some time to go through the how we actually do this. And what we're going to talk about are the tools that my team works on a day-to-day basis. So as I mentioned, we've built a suite of proprietary tools that are all fueled by location data to help us understand where consumers are, when they're shopping, and ultimately what else is going on in the marketplace across the competitive landscape. So starting with the where, and this is really the backbone of our geography first approach. And this is where we're taking foot traffic mobility data to understand the foot traffic patterns of where are consumers coming from when they shop at your store. We understand the density of the consumers, which helps us inform key metrics such as drive times to understand what zip codes do we need to target that have a high density of our consumer, but also are in a realistic proximity to any physical location to entice that consumer to make a shopping trip. So once we have that, we can look at maps such as this, which really show us where across the entire US these consumers are residing. And so that's great. And if you're doing a national campaign, you might think, this is everywhere, and this is where we should target. But going one layer deep is really where Novus, puts our effort into. And this is where we're looking at that same zip code level density of the target, but now starting to overlay where those physical locations are and understanding it's the combination of the right target geography close enough to the store to, again, elicit that shopping trip. So once we have the where, we can talk about the when. So when should we go and activate media? The foot traffic mobility data gives us some pretty good insight that, if you think about what days are people shopping and also what time of day are they shopping. And that can be really, really impactful in terms of how you would intercept that shopping trip or that shopping behavior and become top of mind as the consumer is in market. Once you have a general trend that's interesting, but again, as we're talking about going into that hyper local, customized geography level, it's not just one trend, but you actually have, if you have 1,000 stores, you might have 1,000 different trends in terms of, the shopping patterns for each individual location. And on this chart, for example, this is looking at liquor store sales. And what you see is a couple locations on Sunday don't have any traffic, and that's because they're actually physically closed. Due to local legislation, they might not be able to be open. And so we need to have all those local level insights as part of our planning process to understand how we can tailor a custom media plan for each individual set of geography. And then ultimately, when we look at it and we start to understand both time of day, day of week, that informs us why they're shopping, how they're shopping, and also how would you intercept them, maybe on their morning commute. Or as we see, there's a little bit of a blip Sunday around noon. So what are people doing at that time? And how would we use something like place-based out of home to really activate against that target consumer? So once we have the when, we can start moving into, well, what else do we have to care about? Who else is in market? And this is really where our competitive view it can really be augmented with foot traffic data. So for example, on the bar chart here, or on the line graph, sorry, we're looking at traffic trends by week. Just so happens that my client happens to be the blue line, and their key competition are the red and the orange. And so the client can come to us and say, hey, we're seeing a dip in traffic. Can you guys help us understand what's going on? And the foot traffic data allows us to identify what are the actual outliers or what's driving that. And an overall, it might be one story, but when we start looking at individual stores, individual markets, individual geographies, we can start to understand, what's happening in one region of the country or even one store in a market might be unique. It might have a different set of problems that we need to address from our media campaigns. So once we have the when, once we have the where, once now we have the who, we put that all together to actually build that comprehensive multimedia plan. And so here's a quick case study of how we did exactly that for one of our clients in Jacksonville. And so I'm going to play a quick little live action map here, but the key is it's taking that layered approach of identifying the right geography, leveraging geospatial analytics to understand how each individual multimedia channel might be impacted by geography, figuring out what zips maybe we're going to want to activate at a programmatic level. What are those high indexing zips that maybe we can't reach with TV or radio efficiently, but maybe we can with multimedia digital tactics. And as we just talked about, how can we use something like digital out of home to intercept a routine? So how do we know, if we know when they're commuting, how do we get the right boards that intercept that commuting pattern? So to start, like I said, we're going to start from a traditional standpoint of looking at, well, here's the Jacksonville DMA. Additionally, you have radio coverage, which is really dictated by an MSA. But ultimately, we care about the zip codes. And each zip code has a different set of attributes, as we've talked about. And so when we start layering on a heat map of where our best of the best are, we can start understanding how radio, such as indicated by this coverage map, would cover those zip codes. Or if we're talking about out of home, each one of these pins is an individual out of home board. And as we can see with the star that we just had show up on screen, if that's the store location, how do all of these factors come together to build the right comprehensive media plan in Jacksonville? And then ultimately, from a Novus perspective, we're doing this layer of detail at a store by market level. And so this is what Jacksonville looked like, but just down the road in Miami, or maybe on the other side of the country in Seattle, we're going to take a different approach based off of all the individual unique factors for that market or for that store. So thank you. Hopefully we have some questions coming in now in the chat. And again, thanks for the time to learn about how Novus uses location data to build our tactical multimedia plans.
Thanks for the great presentation. Always exciting to hear about the innovations happening in the out-of-home space.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's really interesting. That's a space that obviously with the pandemic and everyone kind of being locked indoors for a while, we really had to change the way we think about how to look at data and what makes sense and how we look at trends and what's changing. And that's really where location data and proximity to retail locations is really critical.
Absolutely. You got a shout out in the chat from Rob Davis. Always love how Nik makes complicated geolocation data easy to understand. And that's so true. That was an awesome presentation.
Yeah, thanks.
So we do have a question in the Q&A. So consumer behaviors and preferences seem to be changing quicker than ever. How is this affecting the out-of-home industry and your analyses?
Yeah, and I kind of mentioned this earlier where what was happening previously was pretty stable, pre-pandemic. We had baselines, we had trends, and so we've had to find new ways to look at what's happening today, and yesterday and last week, not just what happened last year. And so it's really critical just to have kind of more live stream data sets to be able to look at those trends and how they're changing.
Absolutely. And one thing that you touched on is finding out the when and using mobility data to do so.
Yep.
And over the past year, when people maybe were not as mobile, were there any complementary data sets or alternative data sets that you used to help answer that question?
Yeah, so that's where kind of your traditional census, psychographic, demographic data of this is where we think they live or they had resided really became critical. Again, it was having to rethink what question we are trying to answer, and then just trying to find the most relevant and up-to-date data set that could do so. And so it kind of shook us out a little bit, and we had to just think differently.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Nik. That was a very insightful presentation. Exciting to hear about the data that you're using and the alternative data that you had to turn to in the face of the pandemic. For viewers, this